remember the exact moment my world shattered. It was a lavish dinner party, filled with laughter, expensive wine, and the soft glow of chandeliers. I had spent weeks choosing the perfect dress, making sure everything was flawless. It was supposed to be a special night, the night I finally confessed my feelings. But instead, I stood there, humiliated, while the man I loved laughed at me in front of everyone. He held up the small, carefully wrapped gift I had given him, a mocking smile on his lips. What am I supposed to do with this? The room was silent, all eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. My hands trembled as I tried to form words, but before I could, he turned away, dismissing me like I was nothing. I never got the chance to move on from that moment. With tears in my eyes, I ran out. That night, I died. And then I woke up. At first, I thought it was a dream. The softness of my silk sheets, the familiar scent of jasmine in the air, everything felt too real. My heart pounded as I sat up, my fingers clutching the blanket. The clock on my nightstand blinked February 1st. 2 weeks before the humiliation. 2 weeks before everything went wrong. I had been reborn. The realization settled in slowly, like a sunrise breaking through the night. I wasn't the same girl who had pathetically thrown herself at a man who never deserved her. I had been given a second chance. And this time, I wasn't going to waste it. I walked into the company headquarters with a newfound sense of purpose. My father's company. My company. No one knew I was the true heir, not even him. He worked here, just like before. And just like before, he had set his sights on someone else, a woman who falsely claimed to be the heir to the corporation. He was after money, power, prestige. He had never cared about love. I had been blind before, foolishly chasing him, giving him my time, my effort, my heart. But not this time. This time, I was different. Morning, a familiar voice greeted me as I stepped into my office. I turned to see him. Not the man who had broken me, but the man who had always been by my side. My best friend. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, watching me with the same steady gaze he always had. "You look different today," he said, tilting his head. More, his eyes flickered with something unreadable. "More you." I smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in a long time. Good. Because that's exactly who I'm going to be. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing him. I wasn't waiting for him to notice me, to give me a sliver of attention. I wasn't dressing up in ways I thought he'd like, or bringing him coffee just so he'd smile at me. And he didn't even notice my absence. Because Ethan, was too busy flirting with Sophia, the woman who had everyone believing she was my father's successor. I watched them from across the conference room as I reviewed documents for an upcoming merger. Sophia was beautiful, sophisticated, and played the role of the next CEO perfectly. Ethan, ever the opportunist, was glued to her side, whispering things that made her laugh. A few weeks ago, that sight would have shattered me. Now, I almost pitied them. "Looks like you finally stopped torturing yourself." I turned to my best friend, Elias, who was leaning back in his chair beside me, arms crossed. "I was never torturing myself," I said, flipping a page. He snorted. "Right. So you didn't spend the last year mooning over him like a sad little puppy." I shot him a glare, but he only smirked. Elias had never liked Ethan. He had always said I deserved better, but I had been too blind to listen. "I'm done with him," I said simply, closing one document and opening another. Elias studied me for a moment, as if searching for any cracks in my resolve. When he found none, he grinned. "Good. Took you long enough." The meeting began, and I focused entirely on business. Every time Ethan tried to make a joke or show off, I ignored him. Every time he glanced my way, probably wondering why I wasn't hanging on to his every word, I kept my eyes on the reports. I could feel his confusion. And it was satisfying. Ethan didn't notice me before. But he sure as hell started noticing now. It started small. He'd find excuses to talk to me, ask for my opinion on reports he never cared about before. When I gave him short, polite answers and walked away, he frowned like I had somehow broken the rules of our old game. Then, he started hovering around my office. "Hey, I never see you at lunch anymore," he said one afternoon, leaning against my desk. "We should catch up." I barely looked up from my laptop. "I'm busy." He blinked. "You're always busy now." "Yes." I typed a few more words. "That's kind of the point of having a job." Ethan let out a small, nervous laugh. "Right. But still, we used to talk all the time." "No. I used to chase you." I shrugged. People change. Something flickered in his eyes, something almost like frustration. But before he could say more, my office door swung open. "Sorry I'm late," Elias announced, walking in like he owned the place. He dropped a coffee cup in front of me. "One caramel macchiato, extra shot, just how you like it." I smiled, actually smiled. "Thanks, Eli." Ethan's gaze flicked between us. "You two are close, huh?" Elias grinned, slinging an arm around my chair. "We've always been close." Ethan's jaw tightened. He left soon after, and for the first time, I realized something. He didn't like being ignored. Ethan's sudden interest in me was exhausting. At first, I thought I was imagining it. That may be because I was no longer giving him attention, he was simply confused. But no, he was determined, too determined, to get me to look at him, talk to him, need him again. He started showing up at my desk, lingering even when I barely responded. He sent me texts, casual ones at first, but then, "Why are you avoiding me? Did I do something wrong? We used to be close." "No, I used to be close to you. You never cared." But the final straw was at a company dinner. We had gathered at an upscale restaurant to celebrate the success of a major project. Everyone was there, including Ethan and Sophia, who was still enjoying her place as the so-called heir. I wasn't surprised to see Ethan attached to her side like a shadow. I was surprised, however, when he approached me halfway through the evening. "You're different these days." He smiled, leaning in slightly. "I kind of like it." I raised a brow. "I didn't ask." Ethan chuckled, unfazed. "Come on, don't be like that. I was thinking maybe we should catch up? Just the two of us." I blinked at him. Did he seriously think I was stupid? "Why?" I asked flatly. His smile faltered for a second. "I just miss talking to you. You've been so distant lately." I tilted my head, studying him. I wasn't sure what he wanted, but I knew it wasn't me. Not really. If it were, he would have cared before. I opened my mouth to tell him I wasn't interested. But before I could, Elias's arm slid around my waist. "She's busy," he said smoothly, his voice laced with amusement. I felt my breath hitch. It wasn't unusual for Elias to be close to me. He always had been, but this was different. Possessive. Purposeful. Ethan's expression darkened. "Busy with what?" Elias smirked. "Me." I froze. Ethan's eyes flicked between us, and for the first time, there was something genuine in his expression. Annoyance. Maybe even jealousy. "We're dating," Elias continued casually. "So whatever catching up you were planning." "Yeah, it's not happening." I barely managed to keep my face neutral. "What?" Ethan scoffed. "You're joking." "Nope." Elias turned to me. "Right, babe?" I could kill him. But when I saw the way Ethan's jaw clenched, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides, I realized something. This could work. Ethan didn't care about me when I was giving him my all. But now that I had someone else, suddenly I mattered? Fine. I smiled sweetly and leaned into Elias's hold. "That's right." Elias squeezed my waist in approval, but I could feel his eyes on me, questioning. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. "Since when?" Elias smirked. "Since now." Ethan scoffed. "You expect me to believe that?" Elias chuckled. "Believe whatever you want, man." Then, just to make things worse, he turned to me and whispered, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "You look really good tonight." I swore I could hear Ethan's teeth grind. The moment we left the dinner, I grabbed Elias by the sleeve and dragged him outside. "What was that?" I hissed, stopping near the valet stand. He grinned, shoving his hands into his pockets. "That, sweetheart, was me saving you." I scoffed. "By announcing to Ethan that we're dating? Would you rather he kept trying to catch up?" Elias raised a brow. Because we both know that's not what he really wants. I exhaled sharply, crossing my arms. He wasn't wrong. Ethan had never cared about me, only the attention I gave him. Now that I was ignoring him, he was suddenly interested. It was pathetic. But also effective, because for the first time, he was the one chasing. Elias sighed, his voice softer now. Look, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I do think this could work. I looked at him skeptically. Fake dating? He shrugged. Why not? If he thinks you've moved on, he'll stop. I chewed on my lip. The idea wasn't terrible. If nothing else, it would keep Ethan at a distance. And Elias, well, he had been by my side for as long as I could remember. If there was anyone I could trust with this, it was him. Fine, I said. But we need rules. Elias smirked. Oh, rules? How romantic. I rolled my eyes. This isn't real, Elias. Not yet. I swatted his arm, and he chuckled, throwing one around my shoulders as he led me toward his car. Come on, babe. Let's go before Ethan follows us out here. I let him guide me, but my thoughts were already ahead of me. Fake dating. This was going to be a disaster. The next morning, it started. I walked into the office, expecting business as usual. What I didn't expect was Elias leaning against my desk, coffee in hand, smirking like he had just won a game I didn't know we were playing. Morning, sweetheart. I stopped in my tracks. People were staring. Ethan, who had been speaking to someone nearby, turned toward us. His eyes flicked between me and Elias, his brows furrowing slightly. I swallowed, forcing a polite smile as I walked over. Elias. His smirk deepened. That's not what you called me last night. My head snapped toward him, and he just winked. I wanted to strangle him. Ethan was still watching, his hands clenching at his sides. I could have ignored it. Could have told Elias to stop being ridiculous. But instead, I did something unlike me. I placed a hand on Elias's chest, smiling up at him sweetly. You're right, I said, making sure my voice was loud enough for Ethan to hear. Darling suits you better. Elias's amusement flickered into something else, something almost real, but before I could dwell on it, he recovered, looping an arm around my waist. That's my girl. Ethan's expression darkened. Good. He had made a game out of my feelings before. Now, he could watch as I played one of my own. If someone had told me a few months ago that I would be fake dating my best friend, I would have laughed. But here I was, standing in my office, watching Elias make himself at home as if this was just another ordinary day. It had only been a few hours since we announced our relationship to the office, and he was already pushing the limits of our arrangement. He sat comfortably in the chair across from my desk, legs stretched out, flipping through some reports as if he actually worked here. You're distracting, I muttered, signing off on an email. I'm supportive, he corrected. There's a difference. I shot him a look. Supportive would be quietly existing in the background. This is disruptive. Elias grinned. It's called dedication, sweetheart. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. I rolled my eyes but didn't argue. It wasn't like I could stop him anyway. He was enjoying this way too much. Just as I was about to return to my work, my phone buzzed. A message. From Ethan. Can we talk? I stared at the screen, lips pressing together. Elias noticed immediately. Let me guess, him. I nodded. Elias sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. What do you want to do? I hesitated. A part of me wanted to ignore Ethan completely, but another part, one far more bitter, wanted to see just how far he'd go now that I wasn't at his feet. I placed my phone down, unread. Nothing. Elias watched me for a moment, then stood. Without a word, he walked around my desk and tilted my chair back slightly. Elias. Look at me, he murmured, kneeling beside me. His hand rested gently on my knee, warm and grounding. Are you okay? Something in my chest tightened. Elias had always been like this, attentive, steady. He never pushed, never demanded. He just existed in my life, always there when I needed him. And now, with everything happening, I realized how much I had taken that for granted. I let out a slow breath. Yeah, I'm okay. He studied me for a second longer before nodding. Good. Then, as if sensing I needed something else, he grabbed my hand and squeezed it lightly. And if he gets on your nerves, just let me know. I'll handle it. I smiled, something soft and genuine. I know you will. Elias smirked. That's what boyfriends are for, right? I groaned. Fake boyfriend. Technicality. He stood, ruffling my hair as he walked away. Come on, let's get lunch. My treat. I rolled my eyes but followed him anyway. Maybe this fake dating thing wasn't so bad after all. It wasn't until later that night, when I was curled up on my couch, that my phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. Ignoring me now? I exhaled sharply, tossing my phone onto the coffee table. I didn't owe him a response. Instead, I grabbed my blanket and settled deeper into the cushions. It had been a long day and all I wanted was to rest. A knock at my door interrupted that plan. I frowned. It was late. I sighed. Elias. Dragging myself off the couch, I opened the door to find him standing there, holding a plastic bag and 2 cups of something steaming. What are you doing here? I asked. You looked tired earlier, he said simply, stepping inside. So I brought dinner. I blinked. Elias. He set the bag down, pulled out 2 bowls of soup and handed me one. Eat first. Yell at me later. I sighed, but there was no real annoyance behind it. Taking the bowl, I followed him to the couch. For a while, we ate in comfortable silence. Then, quietly, Elias said, You don't have to deal with him alone, you know. I looked at him. His expression was unreadable, but there was something there, something firm, steady. I know, I murmured. And somehow, that made all the difference. Something had changed. Elias had always been there, steady, unshakable, but now, there was a difference in the way he moved around me. It was in the way he lingered just a little longer, the way his hand found the small of my back when we walked side by side, the way his gaze held something unreadable whenever I wasn't looking. He had always taken care of me, always looked out for me, but this was different. It wasn't just protectiveness. It was possession. A quiet, unspoken claim. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. When I walked into work, Elias was already waiting, coffee in hand, leaning against my desk as if he belonged there. When I moved through meetings, he was close, a silent presence that kept unwanted attention at bay. And when Ethan's eyes followed me across the room, burning with something dark and volatile, Elias didn't so much as flinch. He didn't have to. His presence alone sent a message. She is mine. Whether it was true or not no longer seemed to matter. The lines had blurred, the rules we set forgotten. Elias was no longer playing a role. He had stepped into it, taken it, owned it. And Ethan hated it. It was there in the tension that crackled between them whenever they crossed paths. The way Ethan's jaw clenched when Elias leaned in a little too close, the way his hands fisted when Elias pulled me toward him in effortless familiarity. He couldn't understand it. He had dismissed me before, discarded my affections like they were nothing. And now that I had pulled away, now that I had stopped looking at him with longing eyes, he wanted my attention back. But it wasn't his to take anymore. Elias had ensured that. And I had let him. There was no conversation, no declaration. Just action. Just quiet, unwavering presence. And for the first time, I realized I didn't mind it at all. Ethan was unraveling. I could see it in the way he watched me, in the sharpness of his gaze whenever Elias was near. He was restless, pacing like a caged animal, frustration simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't enough that I had walked away. No, he needed me to look at him again, to react, to care. So he turned to the one person desperate enough to play along. Sophia. She had always clung to him, orbiting his world, and now, with Ethan grasping at anything to get a rise out of me, she became his perfect pawn. It started small, casual touches, soft laughter in my presence, the way his hand lingered at the small of her back, mimicking what Elias did to me. But soon, it escalated. At company events, he made sure to be seen with her, whispering in her ear, letting his fingers skim over her wrist in a way that was meant to be noticed. When I passed by, he turned his attention to Sophia just a little too much, his voice a little too loud, his amusement exaggerated. It was so obvious, so pathetic. But I gave him nothing. Not a glance, not a twitch of emotion. Nothing, and that only made it worse. The more I ignored him, the more desperate he became. When I laughed at something Elias said, Ethan tightened his grip on Sophia's waist. When Elias casually placed a hand on my thigh beneath the table at a company dinner, Ethan pulled Sophia into his lap as if that would shatter my indifference. It didn't. If anything, it only made my stomach churn with second-hand embarrassment. Ethan wasn't in control anymore. He was scrambling, grasping, failing. And Elias? He was watching, observing, calculating. He never acknowledged Ethan's pathetic attempts, never so much as spared Sophia a glance. Instead, his attention remained on me, steady and unwavering, like nothing and no one else existed. Like I was the only thing that mattered. And for Ethan, that was the cruelest wound of all. Elias had always been there. It was something I had never questioned, never even thought to examine too closely. He was my best friend, my constant. The person I could always count on, the one who knew me better than I knew myself. But now, something was different. It was in the way he looked at me, like I was something fragile and precious, something worth guarding. It was in the way his touch lingered just a second longer than necessary, the way he always seemed to anticipate what I needed before I even realized it myself. I should have noticed. Anyone else would have seen it, would have recognized the shift in the air between us. But I didn't. Because this was Elias. And Elias was safe. So when he pulled my chair out for me before a meeting, I didn't think twice. When he draped his suit jacket over my shoulders after I forgot mine in the office, I barely acknowledged it. When his fingers brushed against mine as he handed me a drink, I took it without hesitation, without thought, without realizing what he was actually doing. Elias was always like this, wasn't he? But then there were the moments that made me pause, made something deep inside me stir, something I wasn't ready to name. The way his gaze softened whenever I was distracted. The way his jaw clenched when Ethan was near. The way he always positioned himself slightly in front of me, like an unspoken barrier, like a silent protector. The way his hand found the curve of my waist absent-mindedly, like it belonged there. It should have meant something. To him, it clearly did. But to me? It was just Elias. It had always been Elias. And maybe that was why I didn't see it. Maybe that was why I didn't realize how much he had already chosen me, long before I ever thought to look back. Ethan was waiting for me. I barely had time to register his presence before he stepped in front of me, blocking my path. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides, and his eyes burned with something dark, something furious. You think you can just ignore me? His voice was low, biting. Like I never existed? I exhaled sharply, leveling him with a look. I don't think, Ethan. I know. His nostrils flared. Don't play games with me, Isla. I'm playing games? I let out a cold laugh, shaking my head. You humiliated me, dismissed me like I was nothing. And now, because I won't fall at your feet, you're angry? Pathetic. Ethan's expression twisted. What are you talking about? Oh yeah. I was reborn. That meant my humiliation hadn't happened. He reached for my wrist. You were supposed to be simpering for. And then suddenly, he wasn't touching me anymore. Elias. He was there, like he always was, but this time, there was something different in his stance. A lethal edge, a storm brewing beneath his usual calm. His hand was gripping Ethan's wrist in a vice-like hold, his other arm curling protectively around my waist as he pulled me behind him. I had never seen him like this. If you touch her again, it'll make you regret it. His voice was quiet, controlled, but the danger in it was unmistakable. Ethan yanked his hand back, shaking it out as he sneered. Look at you, he scoffed. Always lurking, always waiting. Acting like a guard dog. I don't act, Ethan. Elias stepped closer, voice dropping into something almost dangerous. Unlike you, I don't have to pretend to care about Isla. His gaze darkened. I've always cared. And I won't let you treat her like some possession you lost. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. You think she belongs to you? No, Elias didn't hesitate. She belongs to herself. But I love her. The words hung in the air like a strike of lightning. Ethan flinched. I froze. Elias didn't. He kept going, each word sharp and unwavering. I love her, Ethan. I've always loved her. Since we were kids. Since before she ever noticed you. His voice softened, but his gaze remained steel. And I will keep loving her long after you realize you never truly did. Ethan's face twisted in rage. With a harsh scoff, he turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving behind nothing but the weight of what had just happened. And then it was just us. Just me and Elias. I let out a breath, shaking my head as I forced out a laugh. You love me? My voice was light, teasing, trying to break whatever tension had settled between us. But Elias didn't laugh. He turned to me, his eyes steady, unreadable. And then, I love you, Isla. My heart stopped. His voice was calm, certain, like he had never spoken a greater truth. I've always loved you. This isn't how I wanted to confess my feelings. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Elias. My best friend. My constant. And now, I was dumbfounded. Utterly, completely, hopelessly dumbfounded. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The words replayed in my head, looping over and over, no matter how much I tried to push them away. I love you, Isla. I've always loved you. Elias wasn't someone who spoke lightly. If he said it, he meant it. And that terrified me. Because what did it mean for me? For us? I spent days avoiding him, not obviously, not in a way that anyone else would notice. But he knew. Of course, he knew. And still, he was patient. Always near but never pushing. Giving me space but never letting me feel alone. And maybe that was what scared me the most. Because without him, without his presence, his unwavering care, I wasn't sure what my life would even look like anymore. And then, everything shifted again. It happened at a corporate gala. A grand, glittering event where business and wealth intertwined, where people laughed a little too loud and spoke in hushed tones when they thought no one was listening. And, of course, Sophia was thriving in it. For months, she had paraded herself around as the rightful heir to the company, soaking in the attention, letting Ethan bask in the illusion that she was the future of everything he wanted. It was pathetic how far he had sunk, clinging to her because he thought she was a path to power. And then came the moment that shattered it all. My father, the true chairman of the company, stood before the crowd, smiling in that measured, commanding way of his. And then, with effortless authority, he gestured toward me. I'd like to formally introduce my daughter, Isla, as the future of this company. Silence. And then, whispers. Gasps. Sophia's face drained of color. Ethan went rigid. And me? I simply smiled. Because now, there was no hiding. No more illusions. No more games. I know. I should have set everything right when the rumors started and Sophia basked in the attention. I just didn't care. It wasn't hurting anyone, so I let her continue to live in her dream world. Sophia looked like she wanted to vanish. Her hands trembled as people murmured, as the realization settled in that she was nothing in this world she had tried so hard to claim. And Ethan? Oh, he looked at me then. Not with arrogance. Not with entitlement. But with the sick, dawning realization that he had spent all this time chasing the wrong woman. Too bad for him. I wasn't something to chase anymore. I turned, scanning the crowd, and there. Elias. He was watching me. Not with shock. Not with greed. Just with knowing. Like he had always known exactly who I was, long before anyone else even cared. And something in my chest tightened. Because for the first time since he confessed, I was finally starting to wonder, had I been looking in the wrong direction all along? Ethan didn't take the humiliation well. I could see it in his eyes when he stormed out of the gala, jaw clenched, fists tight. But I didn't care. Not anymore. Let him stew in his own mess. Except Ethan was never one to accept reality without a fight. I should have known he wouldn't let it go so easily. It was late when I left the gala, the night air cool against my skin as I stepped outside to get some space. My father had been swarmed by investors and board members, and I had needed a moment to myself. A moment Ethan was waiting for. I barely had time to react before he grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward a more secluded area outside the venue. "You lied to me." His voice was low, dangerous. I yanked my hand back, glaring at him. "I didn't owe you anything, Ethan." He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh, but you owed me honesty?" His eyes burned into mine. "I was supposed to be with you, Isla. I was supposed to be the chairman's in-law." I scoffed. "You only care now because of my name, because you realized you made a mistake." I shook my head. "And that's why you'll never have me." His jaw tensed. "Don't do this." "There's nothing to do," I shot back. "You already lost." His grip tightened, his face twisting in frustration. "You think Elias is better for you?" I didn't have to answer. Because at that moment, "Let her go." The voice was quiet, controlled, and dangerous. Elias. He was there, always there, but this time, the fury in his eyes was something I had never seen before. He wasn't just stepping in. He was ready to destroy Ethan. Ethan scoffed. "Of course, you'd show up." Elias didn't even blink. He simply took another step forward, putting himself between me and Ethan. "I won't say it again." "Let her go." Ethan hesitated, his grip loosening just slightly. "This has nothing to do with you." Elias' voice was steady. Cold. "It has everything to do with me." Then, before I could even react, Elias' hand shot out, gripping Ethan's wrist and forcing him to let go of me. The strength in his hold, the effortless way he maneuvered Ethan away from me. It left me breathless. Ethan stumbled back, scowling. "You think you can protect her from me?" Elias didn't even flinch. "I don't think, Ethan." "I know." And for the first time, I saw it. Truly saw it. The way Elias stood like a shield, his body an unwavering barrier between me and any threat. The way his entire presence radiated something unshakable. He had always been this way. Always protecting me. Always standing by my side. And as I stared at him, my heart pounded hard. A heat crawled up my neck, and I felt lightheaded. Not from fear. Not from anger. But from him. From the way he stood in front of me, every inch of him filled with quiet strength, his entire being focused solely on keeping me safe. And suddenly, it wasn't just admiration. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something more. Something terrifyingly real. Ethan glared at Elias for a long moment before finally scoffing. "Fine," he muttered, his voice laced with defeat. "She's not worth it anyway." Elias moved before I could. 1 second Ethan was standing there, and the next. Elias had him by the collar, his voice dark and low. "Say that again." Ethan paled. Elias let him go with a shove, stepping back just enough to let Ethan scramble away. And then, he turned to me. And I forgot how to breathe. "Are you okay?" His voice had softened, but the intensity in his gaze hadn't faded. I nodded. Too quickly. Too flushed. Because suddenly, everything about Elias felt different. The warmth of his voice. The security in his presence. The quiet way he was always there. And I wasn't sure when it had happened. But I knew now. I knew. I was falling for him. Hard. The world around me felt too loud. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, my skin warm, my breath uneven. Elias turned to me, his gaze searching mine, concerned. Always concerned for me. "Are you okay?" he asked again, voice softer this time. I nodded too quickly, too forcefully, because the truth was, I didn't know what I was feeling. Everything inside me was a mess of emotions I couldn't untangle. But one thing was clear. I couldn't look away from him. The way the light from the street lamps cast soft shadows across his face. The way his chest still rose and fell with steady, controlled breaths after confronting Ethan. The way his hands, warm, strong, safe, were still slightly curled, as if he wasn't quite ready to stop protecting me. It overwhelmed me. This man. The one who had always been there, standing beside me, standing for me. And suddenly, I wasn't thinking anymore. I just moved. Before I could stop myself, my hands reached for his shirt, fingers clutching the fabric as I pulled him down toward me. And then, I kissed him. The moment our lips met, it was like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. A sense of rightness that flooded through me, making my head spin. Elias froze for half a second, as if caught off guard. But then, he kissed me back. And it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't cautious. It was real. The way he kissed me, the way his hands came up to cradle my face, as if I was something precious, it made my heart squeeze. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't pretend. This was us. I pulled away just enough to look at him, to see the way his eyes darkened with something deep, something undeniable. And suddenly, I couldn't help but laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because finally I understood. It had always been him. It had always been Elias. I bit my lip, still feeling breathless. I think I might be in trouble. Elias smirked, brushing a thumb over my cheek, his voice warm and teasing. You think? I laughed again, and this time, he kissed me once more, softer, sweeter. A promise. And I let myself sink into it. Because this time, I wasn't running. I was finally right where I was meant to be. The view from my office was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, the setting sun casting golden hues over the buildings. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath as I glanced at the neatly stacked documents on my desk. CEO. The title was mine now. Taking over my father's company had been a challenge, but I had proven myself. The board respected me, the employees looked up to me, and the business was thriving under my leadership. And as for Ethan, he was long gone. After the truth about my identity came out, his desperate attempts to cling to whatever power he thought he had crumbled before him. He lost everything, the connections, the reputation, even Sophia, who abandoned him the moment she realized he had nothing left to offer. Last I heard, he had tried to join another firm, only to be blacklisted by the very people he had once tried to impress. It was poetic, really. A fitting end for someone who had only ever valued people based on what they could offer him. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called, already smiling. The door opened, and there he was. Elias. He leaned casually against the door frame, arms crossed, a knowing smirk on his lips. Boss lady looks good in her chair. I rolled my eyes playfully. Flattery won't get you out of work, you know. He chuckled, pushing off the frame and strolling toward me. Who said I was trying to get out of work? I gave him a skeptical look, but my heart was already beating faster, the way it always did when he was near. You're staring, he murmured, placing his hands on my desk and leaning forward. I huffed, feigning exasperation. Maybe I like what I see. He grinned, his voice dropping to a teasing whisper. Good. Because I'm never going anywhere. And I believed him. Because Elias had always been there. Through every struggle, every victory, every moment in between. And now, standing in front of me, his eyes filled with nothing but warmth and love, I knew. This was our forever. He opened his arms to me. I stepped forward into his arms. I love you, I whispered. His lips brushed my forehead, soft, reverent. I know, he said. A bit too smugly, if you ask me. I smiled and pinched his butt. Hard. Hey, watch your fingers, that's precious goods. I love you too, boss lady. And he sealed it with a kiss.